Skiff Crew did not begin with dignity. It began in a back office of a Terran media conglomerate, where three producers sat around a sticky table and decided that if they couldn't make prestige drama, they might as well make something cheap enough to sell to off-world markets that hadn't learned what quality programming meant. The original pitch meeting went something like, kids, spaceship, junk, songs, done. A budget was scribbled on a napkin. 2 weeks later, a holo cartoon was born. The premise was simple. A crew of plucky children and their robot dog traveled the galaxy in a patched-together star skiff, solving mechanical disasters with wrenches, duct tape, and unearned confidence. The lead, Captain Cassie, was a fearless 10-year-old whose weapon of choice was a wrench half her size and whose battle cry was, "I'll fix it with a bigger hammer." Max the mechanic was loud, perpetually smudged with grease, and prone to yelling, "I've got a terrible plan and it just might work," at least once per episode. Ziggy, the robot dog, was essentially duct tape with legs. He barked, beeped, and occasionally dispensed adhesives from a compartment that was never fully explained. The animation quality was, charitably, variable. Sometimes Cassie's eyes switched colors mid-scene. Sometimes Ziggy's legs didn't animate at all and he just slid across the screen like a possessed vacuum cleaner. But none of that mattered, because the show had one thing children adored: songs. Every time a crisis appeared, a leaky airlock, a reactor meltdown, a cosmic jellyfish infestation, the crew would break into a catchy musical number explaining how to fix it. In episode 3, The Breach You Can Teach, they solved a hull rupture by chanting, "Patch it with tape, patch it with tape, slap it on quick before we deflate." The choreography involved Ziggy spinning in circles while spraying adhesive in every direction, usually covering Max's face. Captain Cassie would finish the routine by delivering a dramatic line like, "Friendship is airtight," and the skiff would wobble heroically into the next adventure. When Terran distributors sold Skiff Crew to GC networks, nobody blinked. At most, it was logged as juvenile cultural export, low impact. The Council's cultural archivists dismissed it as propaganda designed to distract offspring with rhythmic labor songs. Early viewership was minimal. Then children found it. It spread first in playgrounds on mixed-species stations. Younglings of 6 different races began humming "Patch It with Tape." A group of Trelly hatchlings were caught climbing the walls of their creche with spoons strapped to their claws, shouting, "Emergency repairs!" Parents scolded them. The hatchlings shouted louder. Within weeks, the songs had wormed their way into homes across the Confederation. Human children were, of course, hooked immediately, but they were soon joined by Yikari spawn humming bass lines and Zinthari nymphs flapping their thoraxes in time with Cassie's hammer beats. GC parents found it maddening. Adults were forced to hear, "I've got a terrible plan and it just might work," at breakfast, in the bath, and sometimes scrawled on homework assignments where math problems should have been. The annoyance might have been tolerable if not for the side effect. The fixes sometimes worked. One parent reported her child unclogged the family recycler by chewing gum, spitting it into a straw, and humming the "Reroute the Goo" melody. The recycler stabilized. Another story circulated of a small Yikari juvenile who prevented a schoolroom air vent from overheating by singing "Cool It With Kindness" while smacking it repeatedly with a lunch tray. The vent stopped smoking. No one could explain why. Educators complained. Station maintenance crews complained louder. But kids kept doing it. By mid-season, Skiff Crew had become the most popular program in its time slot across 3 sectors. The show itself grew bolder with each episode. Writers leaned into the chaos. Quantum quicksand? "Use a plunger!" sang Captain Cassie in one arc. Lost gravity? "Tie down your shoes!" Max countered before floating into a wall. Ziggy barked and dispensed yet more adhesive, gluing everyone to the ceiling. The children in the audience howled with laughter. Running gags developed. Every episode, no matter how dire, included a scene where someone yelled, "Check the junk drawer." Invariably, the drawer contained something ridiculous: rubber bands, paper clips, a tax audit form that became the key to survival. Fans began keeping junk drawers of their own, just in case. By the end of Season 1, Skiff Crew had gone from throwaway export to galactic sensation. Toy sales boomed. Replica wrenches outsold plush Ziggies 3-1. Children demanded duct tape for their birthdays. Entire schoolyards rang with chants of, I've got a terrible plan and it just might work. GC officials began to worry, not because of cultural contamination, though that was filed in at least 3 subcommittees, but because their children were demonstrating suspiciously improved problem-solving skills. One GC administrator admitted off-record that her son fixed a door lock by dismantling it while humming the "Friendship is Airtight" chorus. The door worked afterwards. She had no idea how. Meanwhile, critics wrote reviews like, "Primitive visuals, infantile dialogue, dangerously catchy." Audience scores hovered near 100%. Some stations had to introduce quiet hours bans on the soundtrack, which only made children sing louder. Still, the council let it continue. After all, what harm could a cartoon cause? The producers, meanwhile, were astonished. What had begun as a budget dump was now renewing for a second season. Merchandise profits covered 3 new offices, one of which had working air conditioning. A board member suggested introducing a rival team of space pirates. Another suggested giving Ziggy a cousin who dispensed glue instead of tape. Both ideas were greenlit. And so Skiff Crew marched onward into its improbable stardom, carrying with it the sight of children across a dozen worlds, strapping spoons to their arms, and belting out songs about how to fix it till it breaks. Nobody realized yet that this was only the beginning. The trouble started with a noise nobody wanted to hear, the thin, wheezing hiss of escaping atmosphere. It came just after an Eshar torpedo clipped the side of Telvik Station, turning a perfectly normal afternoon of cargo checks and cafeteria specials into something far less relaxing. Lights flickered, alarms howled, and half the officers on duty stared helplessly at emergency diagrams that looked nothing like the corridor they were standing in. The hull breach wasn't large at first. Just a hairline crack in the promenade viewport, letting in a whistle of cold vacuum and a trail of fluttering snack wrappers. But every second it spread, splintering across the glass like bad news. Regulations demanded sealant drones, but the power grid had already sulked itself offline. Manual patches required access to bulkheads that were now stuck halfway down like indecisive curtains. And the emergency handbook, revised 12 times in the last 5 years, gave a single unhelpful instruction: apply correct procedure. So the officers froze. Not cowardice, just paralysis by paperwork. Which valve? Which override? Was this technically a Class 2 breach or Class 3? Nobody wanted to be the one who guessed wrong and got court-martialed for inaccurate labeling of atmospheric calamity. The people who didn't freeze were the children. A school group had been on a field trip through the promenade garden when the torpedo struck. Their chaperone was frantically counting heads and muttering things like, "Breathe normally, there's still some air," when one human boy tugged on her sleeve and announced very seriously, "We should do the song." Before she could object, 5 little voices launched into it, clapping their hands in shaky rhythm. Patch it with tape, slap it on quick before we deflate." The effect was immediate. Civilians turned to look. A custodian, dazed but holding a roll of sealant strip, blinked, recognized the chorus from Skiff Crew, and staggered forward. He slapped the tape against the crack in time with the music. The children cheered. More people joined in. A shopkeeper ripped tablecloths into strips. A dockhand grabbed an adhesive sprayer. Someone banged on a vending machine until it coughed up packaging foam. A dozen panicked adults, none of whom had remembered their training, suddenly had a plan because a group of 7-year-olds were singing it at the top of their lungs. The crack slowed. The hiss softened. Every strip went on crooked, bubbly, or upside down, but it held. Down in engineering, the situation was worse. Coolant lines were overheating. The displays showed red across every circuit, but the flow diagram bore no resemblance to the actual piping, thanks to 30 years of temporary upgrades. Senior engineers argued furiously about which valve to close. Manuals contradicted each other. Nobody wanted to touch anything. Then an exhausted junior tech muttered, "Didn't they fix this once? With a straw?" The room went silent. Everyone had seen the episode, the one where Max the mechanic shoved a juice box straw into a coolant feed and declared, "I've got a terrible plan, and it just might work." They had all laughed at it. Some of them had hummed along. The chief engineer looked around, wild-eyed. "We don't have straws." "We have tubing," the junior said. "Same thing, bigger juice box." Someone actually shouted, "Check the junk drawer," a running gag from the show, and tore into a supply locker. Out spilled a tangle of flexible tubes, spare clamps, and, bizarrely, a box of human drink pouches someone had smuggled in. In under 3 minutes, desperate engineers had lashed together a bypass with tubing clamps and one unfortunate beverage pouch squeezed dry. The coolant flow steadied. The core stopped climbing toward meltdown and settled at annoyed but survivable. When the attack finally ended and emergency teams tallied the damage, the truth was unavoidable. Official procedures had failed, but Skiff Crew had worked. The first incident report included, tucked among the charts, the line, "Hull integrity preserved via informal method. See Season 2, Episode 12. A second report from engineering noted, "Coolant stabilized using ad hoc reroute. Comparable to Season 1, Episode 7, Straw for the Win." By the third report, an officer simply wrote, "Honestly, we just followed the kids' show." Room 17B convened in outrage. Several members demanded Skiff Crew be banned immediately for reckless indoctrination of youth into unauthorized engineering practices. The vote was nearly unanimous, until one delegate's granddaughter toddled into the chamber wearing a Ziggy backpack, handed him a roll of duct tape, and asked if he wanted to play Fix the Station. The motion collapsed in laughter, protests, and one resignation. Public sentiment killed any hope of prohibition. Families flooded networks with testimonials. "My daughter saved our oxygen filter thanks to Max. My hatchling rerouted our irrigation line. Yes, it flooded the kitchen, but it worked. My spouse fixed the shower with tape. I don't know how, but I'm grateful." Merchandise sales doubled overnight. GC Ethics Council members found themselves outnumbered at home, where their own children marched through living rooms chanting, "I've got a terrible plan and it just might work." Ratings for Skiff Crew soared to record highs. Within months, a quiet update appeared in official training manuals. Under the hull breach section, a new footnote read, "See also Skiff Crew Episode 12, Season 2. Beneath engineering coolant management, another line, "Informal reroute procedures demonstrated in Episode 7, Season 1 may prove situationally effective." At academies, cadets pretended not to know the songs, but during drills more than one could be heard humming under their breath. Instructors pretended not to notice. Humans, of course, just shrugged. "We told you cartoons were educational," they said. And somewhere on Telvik Station, the patched viewport still held together, a dozen crooked strips of tape proudly framing the plaque someone had nailed up. "We survived. Thanks, kids."
Grab a wrench, grab some tape, fix the skiff before it breaks. Engine sputter, doors won't close. We've got plans that no one knows. Skiff Crew, we'll fix it till it flies. Skiff Crew, with junk we improvise. Patch it, match it, clip it too. I got a terrible plan and it just might do.
If you enjoy my stories set in the GC universe, you can now buy Tales from the GC Volume 1 in Kindle and paperback format off Amazon. It would mean the world to me if I sold a few copies, or even if you just flick through one or two of the stories on your Kindle Unlimited subscription. The links can be found in the description below. Thank you. The next GC story will be out soon.